So just as things are continuing to heat up politically between Gavin Newsom and President Trump due to the chaotic situation in Los Angeles, CNN continues to publish poll after poll showing devastating news for Democrats. And this new one, I think you'll be shocked by. Let's start here.
Let's just sort of start off on the fact that immigrant citizens, immigrant voters, foreign-born voters have gone tremendously to the right on this issue in 2024 and 2025 versus where they were in 2020. Closest to or trust more in immigration. You go back to 2020. Democrats, get this, held a 32-point lead on this issue. Immigrant voters were in the Democratic camp. Jump forward to 2024, 2025. Look at that shift, a 40-point shift to the right among immigrant voters. Republicans now lead on this issue by 8 points over Democrats, more so than any other group that I could find. The group of voters who became more hawkish on immigration were in fact immigrants themselves, immigrants who are registered to vote in this country.
I mean, imagine that. Immigrant citizens are more hawkish on this issue than any other group in our country. That is just mind-blowing. And so is this message from today's sponsor. Don't swipe away. Listen to this. So do you ever feel like Medicare was set up to confuse you? I'm talking about people who are 65 years or older. You pick a plan, your doctor's not allowed to be on that plan, the bills pile up all of a sudden, and when you look for an answer, no one can give it to you. Well, now we actually know why. The DOJ is now suing insurance companies for paying shady bonuses, also known as kickbacks, to brokers for doing what? By diverting you to bad Medicare Advantage plans. That's why I trust Chapter. They are the real Medicare advisors who will actually listen to you. No pressure, no sales pitch, just honest help. And the call is totally free, by the way. It only takes less than an hour. And most seniors are saving up to $1,100 a year. So if you're on Medicare or you're signing up soon, don't go through this alone. Call Chapter today at 323-431-5200. Again, that number is 323-431-5200 and finally get the care that you deserve.
So that's on that issue. How about how they feel about kind of traditionally, historically about Donald Trump?
Yeah. So, you see this shift and you go, what is going on underneath the hood? Well, take a look, Donald Trump. You remember when he first ran back in 2016, immigrant voters were one of his weakest spots. But look at this. Trump's vote share in presidential elections among, again, immigrant citizens, those who are registered to vote. Look at this. In 2016, he got 36% of the vote. You go to 2020, 39% of the vote. Look at this. In 2024, all the way up to 47% of the vote. Some polls I looked at had him barely losing that vote. Some polls I looked at had him barely winning that vote. Again, there is no block of voters that shifted more to the right from 2020 to 2024 than immigrant voters, and Donald Trump, at least in some surveys, actually won that vote. On average, it's about equal. So there may be all this stuff, right, about undocumented immigrants and Trump being harsh on them, but immigrant voters themselves have increasingly liked Donald Trump and have increasingly moved to the right on immigration and into the Republican camp.
Yeah, so at this point, we've got polls, surveys, statistics, historical context, history, and even immigrant citizens saying that they are not in support of illegal aliens coming to our country, drawing on the benefits, getting resources, and skipping the line. Besides men playing in women's sports, I would argue this is the second most strongest issue for the president. And so Democrats are just flat out wrong on this. You will have people in your life try to argue with you on this. Hey, what the president is doing, he's just taking people out of work and he's getting them in the middle of the night. Ladies and gentlemen, can I please remind you of something? ICE can only execute the operation if they have a what? A deportation order from who? A immigration judge. They just don't wake up in the morning and go hang out and hope to catch someone. They got to have the documentation first. But that's not what the mainstream media will tell you, or even Democrats. And I don't think immigrant citizens are even buying that message. Take a listen to this.
Then on that, what you're getting at, how immigrant citizens, voters, feel about people in the country illegally.
Yeah, and this is where it all kind of comes together, Kate Baldwin. Look at this. The net favorable rating, immigrants who are here illegally, among immigrant citizens, again, those registered to vote. In 2020, look at this, plus 23 points on the net favorable rating. But look at where we were in 2024, minus 6 points, underwater. So immigrant citizens have become increasingly unfavorable in their views of those immigrants who are here illegally. So I think it's so important when we're talking about this debate from a political angle to separate those out who are undocumented immigrants versus those who are here legally and those who are citizens and those who are voters, because that group of voters has felt increasingly distant from those immigrants who are here legally. And so again, when we're talking about this, at least from a political angle, this is why Donald Trump feels so comfortable, because in fact, amongst the group that you would think that would be most opposed to this, in fact, they become increasingly favorable, not just towards Donald Trump, but towards a Republican point of view on immigration and becoming distant from those immigrants who are here illegally.
All right, that is just mind-blowing. Now, before we go any further, if you guys have been getting value from our channel, please like, share, and subscribe. Support us further. Just go to the link in the description below, buy us a cup of coffee, shop our merch store. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Now, I know this is YouTube, and sometimes we have to exaggerate things in order for the algorithm to push our videos. I hope you guys understand that sometimes. But in this situation, when you're looking at this poll, I would argue this is a true bombshell, devastating for Democrats. I mean, how do you argue against that? Immigrant citizens don't like illegal aliens. I mean, what more information do you need? I don't know. But here's President Trump just moments ago talking about his phone call with Gavin Newsom. And why I'm going to show you this clip is because according to Gavin Newsom, there was no phone call. Take a listen.
President, when is the last time you spoke with Governor Newsom?
A day ago. Called him up to tell him, got to do a better job. He's doing a bad job, causing a lot of death and a lot of potential death. If we didn't send out the National Guard, and last time we gave him a little additional help, you would have, Los Angeles would be burning right now. Los Angeles would be not a lot different than what you saw take place in California and Los Angeles just a little while ago.
Okay, so I'll show you more of what the president had to say, but let's first fact check Gavin Newsom. I mean, this guy is so obsessed with arguing with President Trump on social media. He's like the kid in his mom's basement, right? A keyboard warrior, so to speak. So he responds to that clip by saying there was no call, not even a voicemail. Americans should be alarmed that a president deploying Marines onto our streets doesn't even know who he's talking to. Really? Because when you look at the actual comment section, what happens? People start to post a screenshot that President Trump shared to prove that he did have a phone call with Gavin Newsom. It lasted 16 minutes. Now, let me actually go to the individual who posted this so you know his name, and it's John Roberts from Fox. He's sharing the actual call log, and here it is, June 7th. Called him twice, actually. First time he didn't answer, and the second time he did. And the governor did file an emergency motion to block President Trump from the illegal deployment, which we debunked yesterday, of Marines and National Guard in Los Angeles. Trump is turning the U.S. military against American citizens. False. The courts must immediately block these illegal actions. Now, here's more of what the president had to say.
Mr. President, these protests obviously started in reaction to these large-scale ICE operations in Los Angeles. Should people expect to see similar operations in the rest of the country?
Yeah.
And will similar protests see similar response?
As you know, we're moving murderers out of our country that were put here by Biden or the auto pen. The auto pen really did. I mean, the people, whether it's Lisa Monaco or whoever operated the auto pen, these are criminals. The people are criminals that allowed these criminals into our country. That you saw on television last night are criminals that were allowed into our country by Biden. And they want to stay, and we don't want them. And they come from jails, and they come from mental institutions, and they come from all over the world, not just South America. And we're not going to let them stay. And it looks like a planned disaster. This didn't just happen. They had weapons, they had tools, they had everything you needed. I mean, they were throwing iced water in bottles, in glass bottles, at officers and at soldiers. These are, you could not use the word insurrection, but you could also use the word, these are very dangerous people. They're bad people.
Okay, so that's what the president had to say. And this is an interesting fact that I believe is not being mentioned enough. This is a very important detail. Pay attention here. Donald Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, revealed that the raids that sparked the violent LA riots were not for immigration purposes. Homan explained that the raids that took place in downtown LA on Friday were part of a criminal investigation into money laundering scheme and cartel activity. So let me get this straight. Democrats are rioting in Los Angeles because ICE, part of a criminal investigation, targeted members of the cartel for their alleged criminal activity and money laundering scheme. Do I have that correct, everyone? Now, the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, had an interview this morning, and I'm going to tell you right now, once again, it was a disaster. Take a look.
I think you all understand that the city is not notified when ICE goes to a workplace. And what we rely on, frankly, is reporting from the community, especially the immigrant rights organizations that have formed the Rapid Response Network. That is usually how we hear about a raid taking place.
I have to pause it because I want to make sure you're getting the right information. She says the quiet part out loud. They do not work with federal authorities. They are using local community via their rapid response network to find out when ICE raids are occurring. Now, remember, ICE cannot conduct a raid unless they have what? A warrant, deportation orders, okay? And the fact that this mayor refuses to collaborate with federal authorities and she would rather use local community to get the information shows you that she's not in control.
We've also received reports of people who were here legally, who were showing up for their annual appointment at the immigration office and maybe even showing up with their family and getting detained. This is just absolutely unnecessary. People have asked me, what are the Marines going to do when they get here? That's a good question. I have no idea. The National Guard that are here now have one assignment, and that is to protect one building, which is the federal building downtown. The second building, which is the federal building on Westwood Boulevard. And as far as I know, nothing has happened in Westwood at all. So this was not needed. The idea that the administration would usurp the authority of our state government, take it away from our governor, Gavin Newsom. The governor knows that if we put a request in for the National Guard and it went to him, he would comply. There was never an issue there because we were never thinking about calling upon the National Guard. So I do want you to know that the violence that has happened has required LAPD to ask for additional assistance, but not from the federal government.
Okay, so once again, we have to stick to the facts here, ladies and gentlemen, because these people expect that you're not going to do your research. So she claims that people are showing up to their hearings that they have been doing every year. These are people who are undocumented or are trying to stay in good standing so they eventually can get their citizenship. Okay. And then ICE shows up and detains them, and ultimately they get deported. Now, the only way ICE is allowed to do that is what? They need a deportation order. And in some cases, if not most, when they go to the courthouse, it is being identified as, hey, you're no longer allowed to be here. You got to go. And so the order is issued, ICE is there, and they get them out. That's why it's called a rapid deportation process. So they're not going to tell you the other side of that because it's just easy to be lazy and just say what it looks like. It doesn't mean that's what it is. And secondly, she says local law enforcement doesn't need any help, but she's totally contradicting the police chief. So who's telling the truth here? Well, I know who isn't, and that is Democrats who just held a press conference this morning where they are now saying things like this. Take a listen.
The protests, and even those who were out of step with what we are advocating, peaceful protest, did not create any violence. Nobody was shot. Nobody was killed. Get it in your head. And so when martial law is called, what are you going to say? I missed the point. Don't miss the point, you all. Don't think that somehow, because they called out the National Guard, there was violence. There was no violence.
This is about retribution, it's about provocation, and it's about distraction. It's about retribution because Donald Trump does not like California. He doesn't like our policies. He does not like our politics. This is about provocation. It was Donald Trump who sent in the military to a peaceful protest.
We still don't know the full consequences of this unprecedented authoritarian overreach. But let me be clear. Congressional Democrats stand in full solidarity with the residents of Los Angeles, with our immigrant sisters and brothers, and with the peaceful protesters who dare to speak out.
Okay, so nothing new there in their reaction. They're going to continue to triple down on this failing message. You would think after losing the election in the way that they did, they would just let it go. Argue something where you guys have a stronger point on, even where you have better messaging. This is not it. Now, I do want to make sure you guys understand, why do they speak this way? Why are they going to continue to fight President Trump on this? Because in their heart of hearts, this is what they believe. Pay attention to what this woman said on CNN last night.
Maria Elena, she wants to say about this because they keep talking about illegal aliens. First of all, I don't like to use the word illegal. It is undocumented. Coming into the country without documents, it's not illegal. It's not a crime. Excuse me. It is. Can I finish, please? It is a misdemeanor. And
it's against the law.
It is
if I still come, it's a misdemeanor, but I broke the law.
It is a misdemeanor, just like DUI is a misdemeanor.
Yeah, so you just saw that. That is at the cornerstone of their perception of what's happening here. They do not believe millions. Some people say it's 21 million, 10 million, 15 million. I don't know. Make up the number between those. But the bottom line is this. Millions upon millions of migrants cross the border illegally. Democrats do not think they committed a crime. Democrats do not believe they should be held accountable for that crime. Democrats actually believe they should be able to become American citizens and vote in our elections. Now, what's also interesting about this entire story is what's happening on Capitol Hill today in Congress. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, is testifying before the House. And of course, they could not help themselves but to question him on the authority and the cost of sending troops to Los Angeles. I think you will appreciate his response. Take a listen.
Congresswoman, thank you for the question. You are right. We are both originally from Minnesota, which is why I recall 2020 quite well, when Governor Walz abandoned a police precinct and allowed it to be burned to the ground, and also allowed 5 days of chaos to occur inside the streets of Minneapolis. The police precinct, ma'am, was abandoned and burned to the ground. And because of that, the National Guard was eventually far too late mobilized. And President Trump recognizes a situation like that, improperly handled by a governor, like it was by Governor Walz, if it gets out of control, is a bad situation for the citizens of any location. So in Los Angeles, we believe that ICE, which is a federal law enforcement agency, has the right to safely conduct operations in any state and any jurisdiction in the country, especially after 21 million illegals have crossed our border under the previous administration. ICE ought to be able to do its job, whether it's Minneapolis or Los Angeles.
I have limited time. I asked a budget
and they
question. Could the Secretary please address the budget? Thank you.
You asked about the situation in Los Angeles, and we believe ICE agents should be allowed to be safe in doing their operations, and we have deployed National Guard and the Marines to protect them in the execution of their duties, because we ought to be able to enforce immigration law in this country, unlike what Governor Walz did in 2020.
So the other complaint that you're now hearing in mainstream media from Democrats today is that it's going to cost us $130 million to send troops to Los Angeles. And they're saying that that is a problem. We are wasting taxpayer money. Okay, let's just follow that logic for a second here. The fact of the matter is President Trump has the authority to protect federal assets and federal personnel. I don't know why you'd put a price on that. And I think the better question is, how much did it cost to allow millions upon millions of immigrants to cross our border illegally? What is that number exactly? Now, Kristi Noem, during the press conference from President Trump in the Oval Office earlier this morning, also targeted Tim Walz in her response. Take a listen.
So in 2020, I was a governor of a neighboring state to Tim Walz and watched him let his city burn. And the president and I have talked about this in the past, and he was not going to let that happen to another city and to another community where a bad governor made a bad decision. So Claudia Sheinbaum came out and encouraged more protests in LA, and I condemn her for that. She should not be encouraging violent protests that are going on. If people are allowed to peacefully protest, but the violence that we're seeing is not acceptable, and it's not going to happen in America. This president is standing up for the average American who wants to walk their child to school every day safely, run their small business, and provide for their families. That's the action that he's taken. He has every authority under the Constitution to send these National Guard under Title X into these communities and make sure that operations go smoothly, that law enforcement officers are protected, that they can continue to do their work without fear of being injured or killed or disrespected, and that they can go home to their families at night. So I'm incredibly proud of the president for activating the National Guard and for sending in these Marines, because these Marines are specifically trained to meet the need that we have on the ground in LA right now. And Governor Newsom has done a disservice to the state of California for many years. The people there should never elect him into a leadership position ever again.
And I think that is the same message for Governor Gavin Newsom as well, and the Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass. These are individuals who have no business being in charge of a city. Now, of course, this is a republic. They were elected, and the people who elected them, we have to deal with the consequences. And hopefully California will learn. And quite frankly, we don't need President Trump or any other congressional member or the federal government to come in and save California. Just let California burn. Let California learn the hard, cold truth of what happens when you elect far left lunatics like Gavin Newsom and the Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass. Now, let me get your guys' take in the comment section below to this update from this morning. What did you think about her press conference? What did you think about the new poll from CNN from immigrant citizens? I just think that is mind-blowing. And then the reaction from congressional Democrats. Let me know your thoughts about all of that in the comment section below. Now, there are so many stories happening at one time during this chaotic situation in Los Angeles, but the one that really was profound to me yesterday came from the president of Mexico herself. She threatened to mobilize more protests in our country on our soil due to something that's in the big, beautiful bill. If you want to know what that something is, all you have to do is click on that video because it's coming up right now.